Most people think addiction looks like it's like chaos. It looks destructive. It looks obvious. But the most expensive addiction you have doesn't ruin your life overnight. It slowly rents it out, piece by piece, while you tell yourself everything is fine. It's comfort. Comfort is sleeping in instead of getting better. It's choosing what's easy over what's necessary. It's telling yourself you'll start tomorrow because today was hard enough. And the reason comfort is so dangerous is because it never feels like a problem. It feels earned. It feels reasonable. It feels like you're being kind to yourself. But here's the truth: comfort charges interest, and it compounds quietly. Every time you avoid the uncomfortable conversation, you lose leverage. Every time you skip the hard rep, the late night, the early morning, you don't just stay the same, you move backward. Because the world doesn't pause while you get comfortable. It keeps moving. Faster, more competitive, less forgiving. Comfort convinces you that you deserve ease before you've earned excellence. That you should relax before you've built anything worth protecting. And over time, your tolerance for discomfort shrinks. What used to be easy feels hard. What used to be hard feels impossible. The people who win aren't special. They're just willing to feel bad longer than everyone else. They choose temporary pain over permanent regret. They understand that discomfort isn't the enemy, it's the entrance fee. So if your life feels stuck, if progress feels slow, if you keep wondering why nothing is changing, ask yourself one question: what comfort am I protecting that's costing me my future? Because comfort doesn't just steal your results. It steals who you could have become. No one wakes up and decides to ruin their future. No one consciously chooses mediocrity. They choose comfort instead because comfort doesn't announce itself as a threat. It shows up quietly, wrapped in logic, self-justification, and good intentions. It feels like rest. It feels like balance. It feels like you're being reasonable with yourself. And that is precisely why people defend it so fiercely. Most addictions announce their cost early. You can see the damage. You can point to the consequences. Comfort does the opposite. It gives you relief first and sends the bill later. When you choose comfort, nothing bad happens immediately. You sleep in and the day still goes on. You skip the workout and your body doesn't fall apart. You avoid the hard conversation and the relationship still exists. You delay the risky decision and your life doesn't collapse. Comfort trains your brain to associate avoidance with safety and safety with intelligence. Over time, this pattern hardens into identity. Comfort feels harmless because it aligns with how the brain is wired. The brain's primary job is not growth, achievement, or fulfillment. Its job is survival. Comfort signals safety, discomfort signals risk. Even when discomfort is the exact thing required for progress, the brain resists it because it cannot distinguish between productive pain and real danger. So when you choose comfort, your brain rewards you. Dopamine spikes, stress drops, you feel calm, you feel in control, and your brain learns the lesson: do this again. That reinforcement loop is where the addiction forms. You don't need intensity for addiction, you need consistency. Small repeated choices to avoid effort, tension, or uncertainty compound faster than dramatic mistakes. Comfort doesn't wreck your life in a moment. It slowly lowers your standards. It reframes effort as optional. It teaches you that if something feels uncomfortable, it must be wrong, misaligned, or unhealthy. Eventually, you stop asking whether something is necessary and start asking whether it feels good. The most deceptive part is that comfort often wears the language of self-care. People tell themselves they're protecting their mental health, preserving energy, or waiting for the right time. And sometimes rest is necessary, sometimes stepping back is intelligent. But comfort addiction blurs the line until everything hard feels unnecessary and everything easy feels justified. You stop pushing not because you can't, but because you don't want to feel the friction. Comfort is harmless looking because society encourages it. Convenience is sold as progress. Ease is marketed as success. You're told that if something is hard, maybe it's not meant for you. If you feel resistance, maybe you should listen to it. But resistance is not always a warning. Often, it's a signal that you're at the edge of growth. Comfort convinces you to interpret that signal backwards. Another reason comfort feels harmless is because it doesn't take anything away immediately. It only prevents things from being built. You don't lose skills overnight. You just stop sharpening them. You don't lose confidence instantly. You just stop doing things that require courage. You don't lose ambition suddenly. You just stop feeding it with action. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. From the inside, momentum is slowly bleeding out. Over time, comfort changes your relationship with effort. What once felt manageable starts to feel heavy. Your tolerance for stress decreases. Tasks that used to be routine now feel overwhelming. This is not because you got weaker randomly. It's because comfort trained you to avoid strain. Muscles grow under tension. So does character. Remove the tension, and everything atrophies quietly. Comfort also lies by promising neutrality. It tells you that if you do nothing, you stay where you are. That is never true. In a competitive environment, standing still is moving backward. Skills decay, opportunities close, other people get better. The cost of comfort is invisible until it's undeniable, and by then, the gap feels intimidating. What makes comfort the most expensive addiction is that it steals without force. You choose it willingly, you defend it logically. You repeat it daily, and because it feels harmless, you rarely question it. You only notice the damage when you look up one day and realize how far you are from who you thought you'd be, how many chances passed quietly, how much potential was left unused, and how familiar it became to settle for less than what you were capable of becoming. Wondering why nothing is changing, ask yourself one question: what comfort am I protecting that's costing me my future? Because comfort doesn't just steal your results, it steals who you could have become. The price of comfort is paid in missed potential, not in obvious failure. That is why so many people underestimate its cost. Failure is loud, it forces reflection, it demands correction. Missed potential, on the other hand, is silent. It doesn't show up as a crisis. It shows up as a life that works, but never really expands. Comfort doesn't push you off a cliff. It slowly guides you away from the path that would have demanded more from you. Most people measure their lives by what they did, not by what they could have done. That makes missed potential hard to quantify. You can't point to the business you never started, the skill you never mastered, the discipline you never built, or the version of yourself you never became. Those things leave no physical evidence, but they are real losses. Comfort ensures those losses remain invisible, which makes them easy to tolerate and even easier to repeat. Comfort convinces you that you're being patient when you're actually being passive. You tell yourself you'll act when conditions improve, when you feel more confident, when the timing is right, but potential is not something that waits politely. It requires engagement. It responds to pressure, repetition, and commitment. When comfort delays action, potential doesn't pause with you. It decays. Skills dull. Courage weakens. Ambition loses its edge. Missed potential is expensive because it compounds. One comfortable decision rarely matters. Thousands of them do. Skipping a single opportunity won't change your life. Making a habit of skipping opportunities will. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, you reinforce a version of yourself that avoids strain. That version becomes your default. Over years, that default shapes the ceiling of your life. Comfort also distorts your perception of what you're capable of. If you never test your limits, you assume they're lower than they actually are. You start to believe that certain goals are unrealistic, not because they truly are, because you've never trained the behaviors required to reach them. Potential is revealed through effort. Without effort, you don't just fail to reach your potential, you fail to even see it. Another hidden cost of comfort is regret. Not immediate regret, but delayed regret. The kind that shows up later when options narrow, when energy changes, when responsibilities increase. You look back and realize there was a window when risk was cheaper, when learning was faster, when recovery was easier. Comfort feels inexpensive in the moment because it asks for so little. But the bill arrives when those windows close. Comfort steals momentum. Momentum is what turns average effort into extraordinary outcomes over time. When you're moving, things feel easier. When you stop, restarting feels heavy. Comfort interrupts momentum repeatedly. It creates starts without continuation, intentions without follow-through, plans without execution. Potential thrives on consistency, not intention. Comfort erodes that consistency. Missed potential is also expensive because it affects how you see yourself. When you repeatedly choose comfort, a subtle narrative forms. You begin to see yourself as someone who doesn't follow through, who plays small, who avoids discomfort. Identity is built from repeated actions. When your actions consistently prioritize comfort, your self-image adapts to match. And once identity shifts, behavior follows automatically. Comfort narrows your future options, skills create leverage, discipline creates freedom, competence creates choice, comfort delays the development of all three. The more you delay, the fewer paths remain open. Eventually, what once felt like choice becomes constraint. You tell yourself you're staying comfortable, but in reality, comfort has quietly decided for you. The tragedy of missed potential is that it doesn't come with closure. There is no clear moment where you can say, this is where I failed. Instead, there is a gradual realization that life feels smaller than it could have been, that you settled into routines instead of building momentum, that you chose ease when growth was available. Comfort doesn't take your potential away. It simply convinces you not to use it. Comfort delays pain but multiplies regret, and that trade-off is what traps people for years without them realizing it. Pain is inevitable in any meaningful pursuit. The only variable is timing. You can experience pain early by doing what is difficult, uncertain, and uncomfortable, or you can experience pain later in the form of regret, limitation, and self-disappointment. Comfort sells the illusion that pain can be avoided altogether, when in reality it is only being postponed and increased. When you choose comfort, You are not choosing peace. You are choosing a temporary numbing of tension. You avoid the hard workout, the uncomfortable conversation, the risky decision, or the disciplined routine, and in that moment, you feel relief. That relief feels like success. It feels like intelligence. Your nervous system calms down, your stress drops, and your mind tells you that you made the right call. But what you actually did was borrow peace from the future. Delayed pain always returns with interest. The conversation you avoided doesn't disappear. It becomes resentment, misunderstanding, or distance. The discipline you skip doesn't vanish. It turns into weakness, insecurity, or health issues. The opportunity you delayed doesn't wait. It closes or someone else takes it. Comfort pushes pain forward on the timeline, and by the time it shows up again, it's heavier and harder to handle. Regret is pain with memory attached. It's not just the awareness that something hurts, but the knowledge that it didn't have to hurt this way. That is what makes regret more expensive than effort. Effort hurts in the moment, but it ends. Regret hurts repeatedly because it replays. Every time you see someone doing what you once wanted to do, every time you're reminded of a chance you didn't take, the pain resurfaces. Comfort creates that loop. Comfort also weakens your pain tolerance. When you consistently avoid discomfort, your threshold drops. Small challenges feel overwhelming. Minor setbacks feel catastrophic. This makes future action even less likely. You don't just delay pain, you make yourself less capable of handling it. So when pain eventually arrives, as it always does, it feels more intense than it needed to be. Another reason comfort multiplies regret is because it accumulates silently. You rarely regret one comfortable decision. You regret the pattern. You regret the years of choosing easy over necessary. Regret often shows up later in life, when reflection becomes unavoidable. That's when the weight hits. You realize how many times you talked yourself out of trying, how often you said you'd start tomorrow, how frequently you chose relief over progress. Comfort gives you plausible excuses. That is part of its power. You can always justify it. You were tired. You were busy. You deserved a break. You weren't ready. Those reasons sound reasonable in isolation. Over time, they form a lifestyle, and when regret appears, it doesn't come from a single bad decision. It comes from the realization that you talked yourself out of your own growth repeatedly, using logic that felt harmless at the time. The pain of discipline is finite. It has edges. You feel it, you adapt, and you grow stronger. The pain of regret is open-ended. It has no clear resolution. You can't go back and do the work later in the same way. Some opportunities expire, some energy doesn't return, some seasons don't repeat. Comfort convinces you that time is abundant when in reality it is the one resource you cannot recover. Comfort also distorts your relationship with self-respect. Each time you choose comfort over commitment, you erode trust in yourself. You tell yourself you'll act later and then you don't. Over time, you stop believing your own promises. That loss of self-trust is painful, and it lingers. Regret isn't only about missed outcomes, it's about knowing you could have shown up better and didn't. What makes this trade so costly is that comfort feels like kindness in the moment. You think you're protecting yourself from pain, when in reality you're deferring it and magnifying its impact. The discipline you avoided would have hurt briefly. The regret it creates lasts far longer. Comfort doesn't eliminate pain. It chooses the version that stays with you. That grows heavier with time. That reminds you of who you might have been if you had been willing to be uncomfortable when it mattered. What feels good now often costs you later, and the danger is that the cost is rarely visible at the moment you make the choice. Immediate pleasure has a way of disguising long-term consequences. The human mind is wired to prioritize the present, to favor relief, ease, and gratification over delayed rewards. Comfort takes advantage of that wiring. It offers you something that feels good right now and quietly pushes the consequences into a future version of yourself. Short-term comfort creates a false sense of reward. You relax instead of training. You scroll instead of studying. You avoid the difficult task and choose the easier one. In that moment, your brain receives a payoff. Stress decreases, effort disappears, you feel better. The problem is that this better is artificial and temporary. It's not the kind of better that comes from progress or achievement. It's the kind that fades quickly and demands to be repeated. Every time you choose what feels good now, you reinforce a habit of delay. The work doesn't vanish. The challenge doesn't dissolve. It simply waits. And while it waits, it often grows. The task becomes heavier because it's been postponed. The gap between where you are and where you want to be widens. What once required moderate effort now requires extreme effort, not because the goal changed, but because time passed without action. Immediate comfort also creates opportunity cost. While you're choosing what feels good, you're not choosing what builds skill, discipline, or leverage. You can't do both at the same time. That trait is subtle but relentless. One evening of comfort means one evening not invested in growth. 1 week of avoidance becomes 1 month. 1 year of choosing ease over effort becomes a lifestyle. The cost is not dramatic failure. The cost is a slow narrowing of future possibilities. What makes this especially dangerous is that comfort rarely feels irresponsible. It feels justified. You worked hard, so you deserve to rest. You've been stressed, so you need a break. Those statements are not always wrong. The issue is frequency and default. When feeling good now becomes the primary decision filter, discipline becomes optional and progress becomes accidental. Delayed costs are harder to emotionally register. You don't feel the weight of future consequences today. You don't feel the impact of skills you didn't build or habits you didn't form. That disconnect makes it easy to repeat the behavior. By the time the cost becomes obvious, the comfortable choice has already turned into a pattern, and patterns are harder to break than single decisions. What feels good now also reshapes your tolerance for discomfort. The more you choose ease, the less capable you become of handling effort. Your baseline shifts. Tasks that once felt manageable start to feel draining. Challenges feel heavier not because they are, but because you've trained yourself to avoid strain. Comfort lowers your capacity while demanding more of it later. There is also a psychological cost. Repeatedly choosing immediate comfort erodes self-respect, on some level that you're trading long-term progress for short-term relief. Even if you don't consciously think about it, the awareness accumulates. You start to see yourself as someone who prioritizes feeling good over doing what's necessary. Identity follows behavior, and once that identity forms, it reinforces the cycle. Comfort convinces you that there will always be time later. Later to get serious. Later to work harder. Later to fix what you delayed. But time is not neutral. As time passes, energy changes. Responsibilities increase. Risk tolerance shrinks. What felt easy to postpone early becomes expensive to revisit later. The cost of inaction rises, but comfort keeps telling you the price is the same. What feels good now often feels good because it removes friction. It eliminates effort, tension, and uncertainty. But friction is where growth happens. Without it, there is no adaptation, no strengthening, no progress. By avoiding friction today, you guarantee a heavier version of it tomorrow. The most painful realization comes when you recognize that many long-term problems were not caused by bad decisions, but by comfortable ones. Decisions that felt harmless, decisions that felt deserved, decisions that felt good in the moment and quietly shaped a future that feels more limited than it needed to be. Comfort creates stagnation, not stability, even though it presents itself as the opposite. Stability sounds responsible, it sounds mature, it sounds like something to aim for. Comfort hides behind that word and convinces people they are maintaining balance when they are actually standing still. The problem is that standing still in a moving world is not neutral. It is regression disguised as safety. Stability implies a controlled environment where growth is sustainable. Stagnation is an environment where nothing meaningful changes. Comfort blurs that distinction. When you stop pushing yourself, you don't freeze in place at your current level. You begin to decay. Skills dull when they are not used. Discipline weakens when it is not exercised. Confidence erodes when you stop doing things that require courage. Comfort does not preserve your current position. It slowly lowers it. People cling to comfort because it feels predictable. Predictability feels safe. You know what your days look like. You know what is expected of you. You know how much effort is required. That familiarity creates the illusion of control. But control without growth becomes a cage. You may not feel threatened, but you also stop expanding. Over time, what once felt stable starts to feel confining. Comfort-driven stagnation is dangerous because it doesn't trigger alarms. There is no crisis. Bills get paid, routines function, life appears fine from the outside. Internally, however, ambition quiets, curiosity fades, the hunger to improve dulls. You stop asking what's possible and start asking what's comfortable. That shift happens gradually, making it hard to notice until it's deeply embedded. True stability comes from capability, not comfort. It comes from knowing you can handle pressure, adapt to change, and recover from setbacks. Comfort does the opposite. It reduces your exposure to challenge, which reduces your ability to respond when challenge is unavoidable. The less you test yourself, the more fragile you become. Comfort doesn't make life safer. It makes you less resilient. Stagnation also affects how you perceive time. When nothing changes, days blur together. Weeks pass without milestones. Months feel repetitive. Progress markers disappear. This is why people stuck in comfort often say times like it's moving faster. There are no defining moments, no growth points, no stretch experiences to anchor memory. Comfort robs life of texture. Another cost of stagnation is that it slowly disconnects you from purpose. Purpose is reinforced through effort and progress. When you're building, improving, or overcoming something, meaning emerges naturally. When you're comfortable and static, motivation fades. You start searching for external stimulation to replace the fulfillment that progress used to provide. Entertainment distraction and consumption increase as creation decreases. Comfort also distorts your relationship with risk. When you avoid risk for too long, it begins to feel more dangerous than it actually is. Small risks feel enormous. Normal uncertainty feels threatening. This makes future growth even harder because the gap between your comfort zone and the next level keeps expanding. Stagnation feeds on itself. People often justify comfort by saying they don't want to rock the boat. But boats that never leave the harbor eventually rot. Movement is what keeps systems healthy. Muscles require tension. Businesses require innovation. Relationships require effort. Lives require challenge. Remove those inputs and deterioration is inevitable, even if it's slow. Comfort-based stagnation is particularly costly because it is self-perpetuating. The longer you stay stagnant, the harder it becomes to restart momentum. Effort feels heavier. Resistance feels stronger. Self-doubt increases. You begin to question whether growth is still possible when in reality you've simply been out of practice. What makes this trap so effective is that comfort promises peace but delivers dullness. It promises stability but produces fragility. It promises ease but creates dissatisfaction. People don't feel fulfilled in stagnation even if they feel safe. There is an underlying restlessness, a quiet frustration that comes from knowing you're capable of more but not demanding it from yourself. Stability without growth is not stability. It is slow decline with better branding. Comfort keeps you still while the world advances, and over time, that distance becomes harder to ignore, harder to close, and harder to accept. Growth begins where comfort ends, not because discomfort is magical, but because discomfort is the signal that you are operating beyond what is familiar. Comfort represents the boundaries of what you already know how to do. Everything inside it has been rehearsed. There is no adaptation required. The moment you step outside of it, your system is forced to change. That forced change is growth. The body, the mind, and behavior all follow the same rule. Without stress, there is no improvement. Muscles only grow when they are subjected to tension they are not yet adapted to handle. Skills only sharpen when they are challenged beyond their current level. Confidence only develops when you repeatedly act in situations where success is not guaranteed. Comfort removes that stress, and with it, the trigger for development. Discomfort feels like a warning because it is unfamiliar. The brain interprets unfamiliar as unsafe. That interpretation made sense when unfamiliar environments posed real threats. But in modern life, most discomfort is not danger. It is effort. It is uncertainty. It is the temporary feeling of incompetence that comes from learning something new. Growth demands that you tolerate those sensations without retreating. Comfort keeps you operating at your current capacity. Discomfort forces expansion. When you choose the uncomfortable action, you create a gap between where you are and what is required. Your system adapts to close that gap. Over time, what was once uncomfortable becomes normal. The comfort zone expands. This is how progress actually works. It is not a leap. It is repeated exposure to discomfort until it loses its power. People often wait to feel ready before they act. Readiness is a comfort-based concept. Growth does not begin when you feel ready. It begins when you act despite feeling unprepared. The feeling of readiness usually comes after action, not before. Comfort convinces people to wait for confidence. Discomfort is how confidence is built. Avoiding discomfort also means avoiding feedback. Feedback is often uncomfortable because it reveals gaps, mistakes, and weaknesses. But without feedback, improvement stalls. Comfort prefers environments where performance is not tested and outcomes are predictable. Growth requires environments where results are uncertain and errors are visible. The discomfort of being exposed is the price of getting better. Discomfort sharpens focus. When something is challenging, attention increases, effort becomes deliberate. You are forced to engage fully. Comfort allows distraction. Growth requires presence. The struggle itself creates clarity about what matters and what doesn't. This is why people often feel more alive when they are working through something difficult than when everything is easy. There is also a psychological shift that happens at the edge of comfort. When you consistently choose discomfort, your identity changes. You begin to see yourself as someone who can handle hard things. That belief is not motivational, it is experiential. It comes from evidence. Each time you do something uncomfortable and survive it, your tolerance increases. Your fear decreases. Your sense of agency grows. Comfort narrows your future by keeping you tied to what you already are. Discomfort opens future possibilities by forcing you to become someone new. Every skill you admire, every trait you respect, every outcome you want exists on the other side of actions that feel uncomfortable at first. The discomfort is not a barrier. It is the doorway. People often misunderstand discomfort as suffering. Suffering is pain without purpose. Discomfort in growth has direction, is temporary and productive. Comfort blurs that distinction and encourages avoidance of all unpleasant feelings. In doing so, it eliminates the very experiences that create strength and competence. When you avoid discomfort long enough, it begins to feel unnatural to push yourself. Effort feels heavy. Resistance feels overwhelming. This is not because you are incapable, but because you are undertrained. Growth begins when you reverse that pattern and deliberately step into what challenges you. The edge of comfort is not where you break. It is where you adapt. It is where your capacity expands, your standards rise, and your perception of what is possible changes. Because the life you want is not built in ease. It is built in the moments you choose to move forward, while everything in you wants to stay where it feels safe. The most successful people choose discomfort daily, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they understand the exchange rate between effort and results. They do not wait for motivation, inspiration, or perfect conditions. They decide in advance that discomfort is part of the process, not an obstacle to it. That decision changes everything because it removes negotiation from moments where most people quit. Choosing discomfort daily is not about dramatic acts. It is about small, consistent decisions that compound. Waking up earlier than feels good. Doing the hard task first. Having the conversation you would rather avoid. Training when energy is low. Reviewing mistakes instead of ignoring them. None of these actions are extraordinary in isolation. Their power comes from repetition. Successful people are not immune to resistance. They are simply unwilling to let it decide for them. Discomfort is a filter. It separates those who want outcomes from those who want ease. Most people want the reward without the strain. They want the result without the routine. Successful people accept that the strain is the routine. They build their days around actions that feel uncomfortable now but create leverage later. Over time, this creates an unfair advantage because while others are waiting to feel ready, the work is already being done. Daily discomfort builds resilience. Each time you do something hard, you expand your tolerance. What once felt intimidating becomes manageable. What once felt exhausting becomes normal. This progression is not accidental. It is the result of repeated exposure. Successful people train discomfort the same way athletes train muscles. They do not avoid it. They schedule it. Choosing discomfort also simplifies decision-making. When comfort is the default, every difficult action requires a debate. Should I do this now or later? Do I really need to push today? Is it worth the effort? That constant negotiation drains energy. When discomfort is expected, the debate disappears. The decision has already been made. The action becomes automatic. Discomfort creates clarity of priorities. When time and energy are limited, choosing hard things forces you to focus on what matters most. Successful people are not doing more of everything. They are doing more of what moves the needle. Discomfort highlights those actions because they are usually the ones avoided. Easy tasks are rarely the most important ones. Another advantage of choosing discomfort daily is momentum. Momentum is built through action, not intention. When you consistently act despite resistance, progress accumulates. Progress creates confidence. Confidence reduces fear. This loop reinforces itself. Discomfort is the ignition. Without it, momentum never starts. Daily discomfort also shapes identity. Over time, successful people see themselves as individuals who follow through, who do the work regardless of mood. That identity becomes self-reinforcing. Actions create identity, and identity drives future actions. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Occasional bursts of effort do not change who you believe you are. Daily discomfort does. Choosing discomfort does not mean ignoring rest or recovery. It means being intentional about what you avoid. Rest is planned. Avoidance is not. Successful people rest to perform better, not to escape effort. They understand the difference between recovery and retreat. Comfort blurs that distinction. Discipline clarifies it. Discomfort also exposes weaknesses early. When you regularly push yourself, gaps become obvious. Skills that need improvement reveal themselves. Processes that don't work get stress tested. This feedback allows for correction before problems compound. Comfort hides weaknesses until they become crises. Most people wait for discomfort to be forced on them by circumstances. Successful people choose it voluntarily. That choice gives them control over its size, timing, and direction. Voluntary discomfort is almost always cheaper than involuntary discomfort. When you choose the hard path early, you avoid the harder consequences later. The difference between average and exceptional outcomes is rarely talent, it is tolerance. Tolerance for effort, tolerance for uncertainty, tolerance for feeling uncomfortable without backing down. Those who win are not braver, they are simply more practiced at doing what others avoid, day after day until the results make the discomfort look small in comparison. Comfort lies by calling itself deserved rest, and that lie is one of the most powerful forces keeping people from achieving their potential. It dresses itself up in moral and practical language, making resistance feel indulgent or lazy, when in reality it is avoidance disguised as self-care. The problem is that people rarely stop to question whether what feels restful in the moment is actually restorative in the long term. They assume that rest and comfort are the same when they are not. Rest is a tool for performance. Comfort is a trap that dulls it. The brain rewards comfort immediately. You avoid a challenging task, postpone a difficult conversation, or skip a session that requires effort, and you feel relief. That relief feels like virtue. You tell yourself that you deserve it, that you've earned a break, that pushing harder today would be unfair. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. Who wants to feel guilty for taking care of themselves? But the danger is that comfort conflates immediate relief with meaningful recovery. One feels good now, the other prepares you to handle more tomorrow. Comfort is seductive because it creates the illusion of productivity. You might scroll through articles, watch a video, or browse social media while telling yourself you are unwinding. The truth is, these activities rarely restore energy in a meaningful way. Instead, they distract you from what is truly challenging and necessary. They prolong the very friction that growth requires. When you consistently choose what is easy over what is hard, your future self pays the price. Calling comfort deserved rest also shifts accountability. When you justify avoidance, you are framing inaction as a reward instead of admitting it is a choice. This makes it psychologically easier to repeat the behavior. One skipped workout becomes a pattern of skipping workouts. One avoided challenge becomes a habit of avoidance. Comfort is insidious because it feels ethical in the short term. It dresses up laziness as morality. The problem escalates when comfort is internalized as a standard. You start measuring your actions against what feels good rather than what is necessary. Productivity is replaced by ease. Momentum is replaced by repetition. Challenges become frightening rather than exciting. What was once uncomfortable and temporary now becomes a default state. You tell yourself you're protecting yourself, but in reality, you are restricting your own capabilities. Comfort also hides behind the language of self-care. Everyone needs self-care, and resting strategically is important. The problem is that comfort hijacks the language. Rest is purposeful. Comfort is habitual. Rest prepares you to act. Comfort prevents action. When you confuse the two, you stop growing while congratulating yourself on your wisdom. You feel virtuous even as you shrink your own capacity. The danger of comfort disguised as rest is compounded by the compounding nature of missed opportunities. One moment of choosing ease over effort doesn't seem costly. One weekend spent avoiding challenge is harmless. But repeated over weeks, months, and years, those choices create a life that feels smaller than it could have been. Skills that might have been built remain undeveloped. Habits that could have been formed never take root. Relationships, careers, and personal growth are delayed by the accumulation of small, justified decisions to stay comfortable. Comfort also reduces tolerance for challenge. Each time you tell yourself that resting in order to avoid difficulty is justified, you weaken your capacity to handle discomfort in the future. What once was manageable becomes daunting. Resistance grows stronger not because external demands increase, but because internal discipline erodes. When a real challenge eventually arrives, it feels bigger than it is because you've spent years reinforcing avoidance as a legitimate response. Another danger is that comfort affects identity. Every time you choose ease over necessary effort, you subtly reinforce a self-image. I am someone who protects themselves, who prioritizes comfort. Identity is shaped by repeated action. Eventually, the belief that you must feel good to act becomes automatic. You are no longer aware of the compounding cost because the pattern feels natural. Comfort becomes invisible because it is normalized. Comfort disguised as deserved rest also undermines long-term motivation. Real rest restores energy so you can tackle challenges. Comfort erodes the need to tackle challenges at all. The energy that could be invested in learning, creating, or building is instead funneled into passive relief. The more time spent in this state, the harder it becomes to summon the initiative to pursue difficult goals. Motivation isn't lacking because people aren't ambitious. It's lacking because comfort trains the mind to avoid action in the guise of prudence. The final danger is the illusion of safety. Comfort tells you that staying in a low-effort state protects you. In reality, it does the opposite. Avoidance creates vulnerability, skills are lost, confidence erodes, opportunities pass by. What comfort calls protection is actually stagnation. And what feels like deserved rest is really a slow surrender to a life of potential unrealized. Comfort's greatest power is that it does not feel like a problem. It feels deserved, it feels natural, it feels wise. But every time you choose the path of least resistance while labeling it rest, you are paying a hidden cost: time, potential, resilience, and self-trust. Over time, the accumulation of these choices shapes not just what you do, but who you become, quietly eroding the very capabilities and confidence that you claim to be protecting. Every breakthrough requires voluntary struggle, and the difference between those who achieve extraordinary results and those who remain average is how consistently they engage with that struggle. Struggle is uncomfortable by nature. It is uncertain, difficult, and often exposes weaknesses you would rather ignore. Most people avoid it instinctively, associating it with failure, frustration, or unnecessary effort. The most successful individuals understand that struggle is not a sign of error, it is the vehicle for improvement, the mechanism through which potential is realized. Struggle becomes transformative when it is chosen, not forced. Everyone encounters involuntary struggle, unexpected challenges, crises, and setbacks. But the breakthroughs that define lives rarely come from those external pressures alone. They come from deliberately placing yourself in situations where growth is required, where success is not guaranteed, and where every step forward demands more than you thought you could give. Voluntary struggle creates competence, resilience, and confidence before life forces it upon you. The human brain resists struggle naturally because it interprets it as risk. Uncertainty triggers stress. Hard work triggers fatigue. Mistakes trigger embarrassment or frustration. These are not inherently negative. They are signals that adaptation is occurring. When you engage voluntarily, you reframe these signals from obstacles into feedback. You learn to interpret discomfort as data, not as a threat. That shift in perception is essential. Without it, struggle feels punitive rather than productive, and most people quit before transformation begins. Voluntary struggle is also about timing and control. Struggle imposed by circumstances often comes at a time when you are least prepared, magnifying difficulty and reducing efficiency. Choosing struggle allows you to control variables when, how, and to what extent you push yourself. By doing so, you build skill incrementally, compounding capability over time. What feels manageable today accumulates into extraordinary capacity tomorrow. Those who avoid struggle lose not just immediate progress, they lose the opportunity to shape how capable they become. The process of voluntary struggle strengthens more than skill, it strengthens identity. Each time you willingly take on something hard, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of handling difficulty. Action builds identity. Identity then drives future action. When struggle is avoided, identity remains limited and your capacity to face future challenges diminishes. Conversely, choosing discomfort repeatedly rewires your perception of your own limits, expanding them steadily until what once seemed impossible feels achievable. Struggle also exposes blind spots. When everything feels easy, you do not notice deficiencies in skill, knowledge, or discipline. Voluntary struggle forces confrontation with those deficiencies. It highlights areas that need attention and creates opportunities for corrective action. By facing challenges intentionally, you accelerate learning cycles. You do not wait for failure to teach you lessons. You extract them proactively ahead of crisis. A key aspect of voluntary struggle is consistency. One isolated effort does not produce transformation. Growth is the product of repeated, deliberate engagement with difficulty. Each session, project, or challenge compounds upon the last. Momentum builds. Habits form. Tolerance for effort increases. Skills consolidate into capability. The longer the practice, the sharper the results. Those unwilling to embrace daily struggle remain on the surface of potential, seeing only glimpses of what could be achieved. Voluntary struggle also enhances decision-making. Difficult situations force prioritization. When effort is scarce, you learn to allocate it where it matters most. You learn to weigh trade-offs, evaluate risks, and make faster, better informed choices. Comfort allows indecision to fester. Struggle forces clarity. Over time, the ability to act decisively becomes an advantage that compounds faster than any single skill or resource. Another dimension is emotional resilience. Life will always present obstacles, and some of them cannot be avoided. Voluntary struggle acts as rehearsal for unavoidable adversity. It trains the mind and body to endure discomfort, tolerate uncertainty, and persist in the face of resistance. Those who avoid struggle are unprepared when difficulty arrives. Those who seek it deliberately build a buffer of experience that allows them to navigate challenges without panic, hesitation, or paralysis. Struggle is inherently uncomfortable, which is why it must be chosen. The willingness to confront difficulty voluntarily separates the average from the exceptional. It is easy to talk about growth, potential, and ambition. It is much harder to do the work when it requires patience, effort, and persistence without immediate reward. Breakthroughs exist in the space beyond ease, in the realm where ordinary effort ends and intentional resistance begins. Choosing struggle also protects against complacency. Comfort lulls you into believing progress is possible without effort. Voluntary struggle removes that illusion. It creates a reality check daily or weekly that forces adaptation. Complacency kills opportunity quietly, but struggle ensures that every day is invested in moving the needle forward. The more you engage voluntarily, the less likely external circumstances can derail your progress because you have built internal capacity that is independent of convenience or circumstance. Ultimately, voluntary struggle is not punishment. It is investment. It is the currency through which potential is purchased. Every act of deliberate effort creates leverage, builds competence, and strengthens character. Those who embrace it understand that the discomfort of today is the foundation of tomorrow's freedom, power, and achievement, and that waiting for ease will only delay the breakthrough that struggle provides naturally. Your future self pays for today's comfort, and that truth is far more consequential than most people realize. Every time you choose ease over effort, convenience over growth, or avoidance over action, you are essentially writing a check that your future self is obligated to cash. The payment may not be immediate, which is why comfort feels harmless, but over time, the compounded cost accumulates in ways that become increasingly difficult to manage. The life you live tomorrow is directly shaped by the choices you make today, and comfort is a silent tax that reduces the options, opportunities, and potential of your future self. When you prioritize comfort, you trade long-term capability for short-term relief. You skip a difficult conversation, a late-night study session, or a challenging workout, and in that moment, it feels like you're preserving energy. You feel good now. Your stress drops. Your brain tells you that you made a smart choice, but the consequences of that choice are deferred. Your skills don't improve, your discipline doesn't strengthen, and your confidence doesn't grow. The person you will need to be tomorrow is the one who pays the price for today's avoidance. This concept becomes particularly clear when you look at cumulative habits. Comfort rarely manifests as a single catastrophic decision. Instead, it is the accumulation of hundreds, thousands of small, seemingly inconsequential choices over time. One skipped task, one avoided confrontation, one extra hour of passive entertainment does not ruin your life, but repeated over months and years, those choices shape a future self who is less skilled, less disciplined, and less prepared to handle challenges. The cost compounds silently, often without your awareness, until it is unavoidable. The future self pays in multiple dimensions. Professionally, comfort limits growth and opportunity. Each time you avoid pushing beyond what is easy, you forfeit skill development, leadership experience, or risk taking that could have created leverage. The skills you don't build today are the ones your future self will lack when opportunities arise. Socially, comfort leads to avoidance of difficult but necessary conversations, networking, or acts of courage that could have deepened relationships or expanded influence. Emotionally, comfort erodes resilience and self-trust, because each time you choose ease over challenge, you reinforce a version of yourself who avoids friction and shrinks from effort. One of the most insidious aspects of comfort is its ability to make the cost invisible in the short term. It feels justified, even deserved. You tell yourself that you are resting, being reasonable, or waiting for the right time. But the bill is still being accrued. Your future self will face the compounded interest on the debt incurred today, often in situations where delay makes the consequences harsher. The easy choice feels safe now, but the harder reality will arrive with more weight than it would have if you had confronted the challenge earlier. The temporal disconnect between comfort and consequence also erodes accountability. It is easy to deceive yourself when the cost is delayed. Immediate pain is persuasive. Delayed pain is negotiable. Comfort thrives in this gap. You tell yourself that tomorrow you will act differently, that you will catch up, or that you will make up for lost time. Yet human nature and external circumstances rarely allow perfect redemption. The future self inherits the responsibilities of the present self, and if today's choices are guided by avoidance, the burden grows heavier. Choosing comfort also shapes identity in a way that compounds the cost to your future self. Identity is built through repeated behavior. Every time you choose what feels easy over what is necessary, you reinforce a version of yourself who avoids discomfort. Over time, that identity solidifies. Future challenges are then approached with the same avoidance, making it increasingly difficult to break the pattern. In effect, your future self becomes trapped in a habit loop that your present self has constructed, and the longer the loop continues, the more entrenched it becomes. The opportunity cost is another critical dimension. Every time you choose comfort, you forego experiences, lessons, and growth that could have been attained through effort. Some opportunities never return. Some skills cannot be acquired later with the same ease or efficiency. Your future self will face limitations not because of failure in the traditional sense, but because the necessary foundation was never built. Comfort creates a deficit that no amount of later effort can fully repay. Moreover, comfort often delays the development of resilience. Life is inherently uncertain and challenging, and your future self will inevitably encounter adversity. Choosing comfort today reduces exposure to manageable friction, which is where resilience is built. As a result, when real challenges arise, your future self may lack the capacity to respond effectively. The very person who will need to act decisively, endure hardship, and adapt is the one whose preparation has been postponed. Finally, comfort shifts how you value time. The present feels abundant, so choosing ease seems harmless. But time is finite. Every moment spent in avoidance is a moment your future self cannot reclaim. The longer you indulge in comfort, the fewer resources, skills, relationships, energy, and confidence your future self has at their disposal. In essence, comfort robs from tomorrow to pay for an illusion of relief today, and the consequences grow exponentially as deferred responsibilities and missed growth accumulate. So if you want a life that expands rather than contracts, a future that rewards rather than punishes, you have to stop letting comfort write the checks your future self is forced to cash. Every moment of avoidance, every easy choice, every delayed action compounds silently, and the only way to reclaim that power is to embrace the discomfort that builds strength, skill, and freedom today. Your comfort may feel harmless now, but your future will pay for it, and the cost is far higher than you realize.